It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in our small suburban neighborhood, where life usually moved at a predictable, peaceful pace. Angela and Andrew, who lived just a couple of doors down, always seemed like the perfect couple, settled, happy, the picture of domestic bliss. But beneath that polished exterior, something simmered just out of sight, a tension I couldn't quite define. And for some reason, it seemed to be directed at me, especially from Angela. I had just given birth to my son, a tiny, beautiful miracle who filled me with a joy I wanted to share with everyone. I thought, perhaps, that bringing him into the fold would tighten the bonds of our little circle. So one afternoon, I walked over to their house, cradling my newborn in my arms, eager to introduce him. "Hey, Angela, look who's here," I said, beaming with pride. "Isn't he just adorable?" Angela's lips curved into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was something in them, something dark and unreadable. "He's lovely, Lily." "Congratulations," she said, the words clipped, her voice hollow. Andrew, on the other hand, was warm and sincere. "He's perfect, Lily. We're so happy for you," he said, though I noticed the way he glanced at Angela, something hesitant, almost wary in his expression. That was the first sign, though I tried to ignore it. But as the weeks passed, the unease only deepened. What started as small, uncomfortable moments turned into awkward family dinners filled with passive-aggressive comments and tension so thick it was suffocating. One evening, unable to shake the feeling, I turned to Andrew. "Is everything okay with Angela? She seems different." He exhaled heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "It's complicated, Lily. She's dealing with things internally. I don't know how to help her." I didn't want to push, but the strain was becoming impossible to ignore. Then, everything came to a head. It was a family gathering, one of those big, obligatory dinners where everyone came together, pretending life was simple. But the atmosphere was strained from the start, and Angela was visibly on edge. When it was her turn to hold my baby, something in her cracked. Without warning, her expression twisted into something unrecognizable, and before I could react, she slapped me. Hard. A sharp, stunned silence filled the room. My cheek burned from the impact, my shock mirrored in the wide eyes of everyone around me. My baby, startled by the sudden chaos, let out a piercing wail. "Angela, what the hell?" Andrew's voice thundered through the room, thick with disbelief and fury. Angela stood frozen, staring at her own hand as if it had betrayed her. I don't know," she stammered, her voice shaking. Her face paled with horror, as if she couldn't believe what she had just done. My parents rushed toward us, their faces bewildered. "Why would you do that?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. Angela didn't answer. She just stood there, looking lost, while I held my baby close, rocking him as his cries softened against my chest. Andrew approached me, his face carved with guilt. "Lily. I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what got into her." And in that moment, everything changed. The illusion of Angela and Andrew's perfect life shattered before our eyes, revealing the fractures that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. The days that followed were heavy with tension, thick enough to drown in. Andrew, a lawyer by profession, found himself in an impossible position. One evening, he and Angela had a conversation that felt less like a discussion and more like a reckoning. "I've seen so many family disputes in my career," Andrew said quietly, his voice weighted with sadness. "I never imagined we'd be in the middle of one." Angela's eyes burned with desperation. "You're my husband, Andrew. You're supposed to be on my side." "This isn't about sides, Angela," he replied, his composure barely holding. "It's about right and wrong. You hit my sister in front of everyone. I can't just ignore that." Tears welled in her eyes. "I made a mistake, but I'm your wife. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" At the same time, I sat in my own living room, confiding in a close friend, my emotions tangled and raw. "I never thought Angela would do something like this," I admitted. "And Andrew, he's stuck between us." "Lily," my friend said firmly, "whatever happens, you need to protect yourself and your baby." Angela crossed a line. Andrew was trapped between duty and love, between his role as a lawyer and his role as a husband. He knew the legal consequences of Angela's actions, but the cost of pursuing them was unimaginable. The next day, he met me at a small coffee shop, exhaustion etched into his face. "Lily, as a lawyer, I know what Angela did has consequences," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But as your brother, this is breaking my heart." I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. "I don't want to tear our family apart, Andrew. But I can't just let this go. It's not just about me, it's about setting an example for my child." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of my decision. "I'll stand by you, Lily. Not just as your brother, but as a lawyer who believes in justice." His words were a comfort, but they also marked the beginning of a battle I never imagined fighting. In the weeks that followed, Andrew and I worked together to build the case, his own wife now the subject of a legal battle he couldn't turn away from. Every detail, every witness statement, every moment of that evening had to be documented. Meanwhile, Angela unraveled. Alone in their house, she wrestled with her guilt and anger, her thoughts a relentless storm. "Why can't they see it was a mistake?" she whispered to herself. "Why isn't Andrew defending me?" A friend urged her to face reality. "You made a big mistake, Angela. But if you own up to it, maybe people will start to understand." Through it all, the emotional toll weighed heavy. At a family dinner, my father placed a reassuring hand on mine. "Lily, we know this is difficult, but you're doing the right thing," he said. "Angela needs to be held accountable." I sighed, the conflict gnawing at me. "I just wish it didn't have to be like this." My mother squeezed my hand gently. "Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the most necessary ones." Andrew, caught between two worlds, found solace in his work, but even there, the burden followed him. Late one night, he confided in a colleague. "I'm stuck, John," he admitted, rubbing his temples. "On one side, I have my sister, who I love and want to protect. And on the other, my wife." The battle lines had been drawn, and none of us would come out of it unchanged. I thought I knew Andrew. He had always been a good man, steady, fair, principled. But this wasn't just about family, or marriage, or the tangled web of personal loyalties. This was about doing what was right. John, his longtime colleague and friend, sat across from him, offering a rare moment of clarity in the storm. "Andrew, this isn't just a moral dilemma. It's about standing for justice," he said, his voice firm yet understanding. As the trial date loomed closer, tensions in our fractured world boiled over. Angela, once composed, now felt cornered, her isolation turning her bitter and defensive. One evening, Andrew approached her cautiously in the house they once shared. "Angela, we need to talk about the trial, about how you want to handle this." His voice was careful, measured, as if any sudden movement might set off another explosion. But Angela was already on edge, her emotions raw and unchecked. "What's there to talk about, Andrew? You've already chosen your side. You're not my husband anymore. You're just my accuser." The venom in her words stung, each syllable laced with betrayal. Andrew exhaled slowly, forcing himself to keep his composure. "It's not about sides, Angela. It's about taking responsibility. I want to help you, but you have to be willing to help yourself first." The weight of those words hung between them, thick and suffocating, but neither one spoke again. The silence said enough. When the day of the trial arrived, the air in the courtroom was almost unbearable, thick with anticipation and quiet dread. I sat beside Andrew, my hands clenched together in my lap, my nerves wound tight like a coiled spring. "Lily," Andrew whispered, leaning slightly toward me as the proceedings began, "no matter what happens today, remember, you did the right thing by standing up for yourself." I nodded, his quiet reassurance grounding me, even as my stomach twisted with anxiety. The trial unfolded like a slow-moving nightmare, every moment a collision of past pain and present consequences. Witnesses spoke, evidence was presented, and through it all, Angela sat rigid, her face unreadable. But I could feel her gaze shift toward us now and then, filled with resentment, with regret, with something unspoken that I couldn't quite name. During a brief recess, I slipped into a quiet corner of the courthouse, needing a moment to breathe, to process, to steady myself. My thoughts swirled in chaotic patterns, each one heavier than the last. "Lily, are you okay?" The familiar voice broke through the fog. I turned to see my friend, her face filled with concern. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's just a lot. I never wanted this." She placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes life throws us into deep waters," she said gently. "Not to drown us, but to cleanse us." Her words settled into my heart, soft yet powerful. When the trial resumed, Angela finally took the stand. Her voice trembled as she spoke, the weight of everything pressing down on her. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she admitted. "I lost control, and I regret it every single day. I'm truly sorry." For a brief moment, her eyes met mine, and in them, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. The trial concluded, and the judge delivered the verdict. Angela was found guilty. The finality of it settled over the room like a heavy curtain. A collective sigh of relief rippled through those present, though the emotions were complex: justice, sorrow, and the lingering echoes of broken relationships. Afterward, Andrew and I stepped outside into the sunlight, the brightness almost jarring after the intensity of the courtroom. "Lily," he said, his voice thick with exhaustion and something else, hope. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope we can move past this. That we can rebuild." I looked at him, my brother, the man who had been caught between impossible choices. "I hope so too, Andrew. We've all lost something in this. But it's time to heal." The weeks that followed were a slow journey back to normalcy, or at least something close to it. I focused on healing, on caring for my child, on finding joy in the simple moments: his laughter, the warmth of his tiny hand in mine, the quiet peace of rocking him to sleep at night. One evening, I sat with our parents over dinner, the weight of the past months settling between us. "Lily, you've shown so much strength through all of this," my father said, his voice warm with pride. "We're proud of you." "It wasn't easy," I admitted, "but I've learned a lot, about myself, about forgiveness, about moving forward." Meanwhile, Angela walked her own difficult path. Alone in her small apartment, she faced the reality of her choices. In a quiet therapy session, she let her guard down for the first time in months. "I've lost everything," she confessed, her voice thick with regret. "My husband, my dignity. How do I even begin to make things right?" Her therapist studied her for a moment before responding. "It starts with forgiving yourself. Acknowledge your mistakes. Learn from them. Only then can you begin to rebuild." The idea of redemption felt distant, but not impossible. It was a start. As the seasons changed, so did we. Life moved forward in quiet, unexpected ways. One sunny afternoon, I sat in the park, watching my son giggle as he played in the grass. I heard footsteps approach and turned to see Andrew standing there, his expression hesitant but hopeful. "Lily," he said, a small smile forming, "it's really good to see you." I smiled back. "You too, Andrew. Look, your uncle's here," I said to my little one, who grinned up at him with wide, joyful eyes. We sat together on a bench, talking, not about the past, but about the future. About healing. About what comes after pain. "I'm learning to find balance," Andrew admitted, his voice carrying a newfound wisdom. "To forgive myself. To look ahead." We spoke about the lessons we had learned, the scars we carried, and the hope that still remained. As for Angela, her journey was far from over. Sitting with a close friend in her small apartment, she spoke with a quiet determination. "I've lost so much," she admitted, "but in a way, I've also found myself. I'm not the same person I was." Her friend nodded, offering encouragement. "It's a new beginning, Angela. You have a chance to rebuild. To be better." And so, we all moved forward in our own ways. One evening, as I tucked my son into bed, I watched his peaceful face and felt something settle inside me, something quiet and steady. This story, our story, had been one of pain, of choices, of consequences. But more than anything, it had been a story of resilience. Of learning that even in the darkest times, there is always a path to the light. And perhaps, that was the most important lesson of all.